Most people have no idea that the thing sitting on their kitchen counter right now, the thing they reach for every single morning, the thing they put in their coffee and sprinkle on their food and grab from the vending machine without thinking twice, is slowly, quietly, and very efficiently dismantling their health from the inside out. And the scary part? Your body has been screaming at you about it for years. It has been sending you signals so loud and so consistent that you have probably just accepted them as your normal. You wake up tired. You eat a meal and then crash 20 minutes later. Your stomach has a softness around the middle that no amount of cardio seems to touch. You get moody in the afternoon. Your skin breaks out. Your joints ache. Your brain feels like it is operating through a thick wall of fog. And here is what nobody tells you. None of that is aging. None of that is just stress. None of that is genetic bad luck. Almost all of it traces back to one source: sugar. And what happens to your body when you actually cut it out completely for just 14 days will genuinely shock you. Not because it is dramatic in a scary way, but because the speed and depth of the transformation is something most people never get to experience because they never try. So let us walk through exactly what happens inside your body, day by day, hour by hour, when you make the decision to stop giving sugar the keys to your biology. The very first thing that happens within the first 24 to 48 hours is something most people are not prepared for, and it is the main reason so many people quit before they ever get to the good part. Your body goes into what can only be described as a withdrawal response. Now, before you minimize that word, understand what is actually happening at the cellular level. Sugar, particularly refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup, activates the same reward circuitry in your brain as certain addictive substances. It triggers a dopamine release that is intense, fast, and temporary. And because it is temporary, your brain immediately begins anticipating the next hit. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable neurochemistry. So when you remove sugar from the equation, your brain registers an absence. It throws a kind of internal alarm. You may feel irritable, headachy, tired in a bone-deep way that feels different from ordinary fatigue. You might feel a strange low-grade anxiety, a restlessness that you cannot explain. Some people describe it as feeling emotionally flat, like someone turned down the volume on everything. This is real. This is physiological. And this is the exact moment where most people look at themselves in the mirror and say, I clearly need sugar. My body is telling me so. But here is the truth that changes everything. Your body is not telling you that you need sugar. Your body is telling you that it has been dependent on sugar, and dependence and need are not the same thing. Not even close. Push through this window, and on the other side of it, the transformation begins. By day 3, something quietly extraordinary starts to happen. Your blood glucose levels, which have been riding a roller coaster for years, possibly for decades, begin to stabilize. And when blood glucose stabilizes, everything downstream of it begins to settle. Insulin, the hormone your pancreas has been pumping out in massive quantities to deal with your sugar intake, finally gets a break. And this is where things get genuinely interesting, because insulin is not just a blood sugar regulator. Insulin is one of the most powerful hormonal signals in your entire body. It governs fat storage. It controls inflammation. It influences your hunger signals, your energy allocation, your hormonal balance, your cellular aging process, and your brain chemistry. When insulin is chronically elevated, which is what happens when you eat sugar regularly throughout the day, it sends one continuous message to your body: store, store, store. Hold on to fat. Keep building reserves. Stay in a state of excess. The moment you stop flooding your system with sugar, insulin drops. And when insulin drops, fat cells get a signal they may not have received in a long time: release. And so begins a process where your body, almost reluctantly at first, begins learning how to access its own stored energy instead of constantly demanding more from outside itself. This is not a small thing. This is a fundamental shift in your metabolic identity. By the end of the first week, the physical changes start becoming undeniable. One of the first things people notice, and it surprises almost everyone, is how much less bloated they look and feel. The midsection begins to soften in a different way. The puffiness around the face fades. Clothes that felt tight begin to feel different. And here is why this happens so fast. Sugar causes water retention. When your body stores glucose as glycogen in your muscles and liver, each gram of glycogen pulls approximately 3 grams of water along with it. When you stop flooding your system with glucose, your glycogen stores begin to deplete, and all of that water releases with them. Some people drop 5, 6, even 10 pounds in the first week alone, and while that is not all fat, it is real weight, real fluid that your body was holding onto unnecessarily, fluid that was putting pressure on your joints, your heart, your kidneys, your circulatory system. Beyond the water, actual fat burning accelerates. Your body, now deprived of its preferred shortcut fuel, begins converting fat into ketones, which your cells, especially your brain cells, can use as a highly efficient alternative energy source. And ketones are interesting because they do not just fuel your brain. Research shows they actively support the growth and maintenance of neurons. You are not just running your brain, you are renovating it. The mental changes that happen between day 5 and day 10 are the ones that genuinely stop people in their tracks, because nobody talks about how much sugar affects the mind. Most people go through their entire lives thinking that the brain fog, the lack of focus, the inability to concentrate, the way they read the same paragraph 3 times and still cannot retain it, is just how their brain works. It is not. It is what chronic sugar consumption does to your prefrontal cortex over time. Sugar creates inflammation throughout the body, and the brain is not immune to that inflammation. In fact, the brain is one of the most inflammation-sensitive organs in the entire body. When you reduce sugar and that systemic inflammation begins to quiet down, people describe a mental clarity that they had forgotten was even possible. Thoughts come faster. Retention improves. The mental resistance that used to greet every difficult task begins to ease. Creativity returns. Focus deepens. Some people describe it as the cognitive equivalent of cleaning a windshield they did not realize was dirty until they could suddenly see through it completely. And the mood shift that accompanies this is equally profound. Without the blood sugar spikes and crashes driving emotional volatility, the emotional baseline stabilizes. The afternoon irritability fades. The inexplicable anxious edge that follows a high sugar meal disappears. People around you notice. You notice? And you start to wonder how long you have been living below your emotional and cognitive baseline without realizing it. Now let us talk about something that is rarely mentioned in these conversations, but is absolutely critical to understand. What is happening to your liver during these 14 days? The liver is the organ most directly damaged by excess sugar, specifically fructose, which is the component of sugar that your liver has to process almost entirely on its own. Unlike glucose, which can be used by every cell in your body, fructose goes almost exclusively to the liver, where it gets converted into fat when consumed in excess. This is how non-alcoholic fatty liver disease develops, and it is far more common than most people realize. Millions of people are walking around with a liver that is increasingly clogged with fat, a condition that impairs its ability to filter toxins, regulate hormones, produce proteins, and perform the hundreds of other metabolic functions it is responsible for. When you cut out sugar, the liver begins a process of clearing that fat. It starts burning through its own stored fat as fuel. The congestion eases. Liver enzymes that were elevated begin to normalize. And as liver function improves, everything it supports improves with it, from hormone regulation to cholesterol management to the way your body handles medications and nutrients. Your skin, which is one of the most visible indicators of liver health, often begins to clear and brighten noticeably during this period. The connection between sugar, liver function, and skin quality is one of the most underappreciated relationships in the entire field of health. And then there is the hunger phenomenon, which is perhaps the most immediately life-changing thing that happens when you cut out sugar. And it is the one that most people simply do not believe until they experience it themselves. Sugar does not satisfy hunger. Sugar manufactures hunger. Every time you eat something sweet, your blood glucose spikes, insulin floods in to bring it back down, and in doing so, often overshoots, leaving your blood glucose slightly below where it started. That dip, that mild hypoglycemic state, triggers a hunger signal. Your brain says eat again. And because sugar is always the fastest fix, you reach for more sugar, which starts the cycle again. This is not a weakness of character. This is a biological loop that sugar itself creates and sustains. When you break that loop, when your blood sugar is no longer riding that wave, something remarkable happens. The hunger that used to follow you around all day simply quiets. You eat a meal and you are genuinely satisfied. You go 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours without thinking about food. The constant background noise of appetite that you thought was just part of being human turns out to have been manufactured by the very thing you thought was feeding you. And when that noise stops, when you realize that you have been eating out of a cycle rather than out of actual biological need, the freedom that comes with that realization is profound. By the end of the full 14 days, the cumulative effect of everything that has been happening at the cellular, hormonal, neurological, and metabolic level becomes visible in ways that go beyond how you look. It becomes apparent in how you move, how you think, how you feel in the morning when your alarm goes off. People who complete this period consistently report that they wake up and feel rested, genuinely rested, in a way they had stopped expecting sleep to provide. Joint stiffness that they had attributed to age often fades significantly because the inflammation that was feeding it has been dramatically reduced. Blood pressure tends to drop. Resting heart rate improves. Kidney function, which is put under enormous strain by chronically elevated blood sugar, begins to recover. The risk factors for serious cardiovascular events, elevated triglycerides, arterial inflammation, poor cholesterol ratios all begin shifting in the right direction. And perhaps most importantly, the cravings themselves, those urgent, insistent, almost desperate pulls towards sweet things, quiet to a level that most people have never experienced as adults. Sugar still exists. It still tastes sweet. But its power over your behavior, over your mood, over your decisions, diminishes to something manageable, something you choose rather than something that chooses for you. Here is what it all comes down to, and this is the part that I want you to sit with for a moment. Every system in your body, every organ, every hormone, every neuron is constantly adapting to the environment you create through what you eat. Your body is not fixed. It is not locked into its current state. It is responsive, dynamic, and remarkably capable of repair when you give it the conditions it needs. 14 days is not a long time. It is not a sacrifice. It is an experiment in discovering what your body actually feels like when it is not fighting an uphill battle against the most pervasive ingredient in the modern food supply. Most people will read this and feel a flicker of something, curiosity, maybe a little hope, maybe some resistance. And then they will scroll on. But if you are the kind of person who actually wants to know what your body is capable of, not based on what someone told you, but based on your own direct experience, then the only thing standing between you and that knowledge is a decision. 2 weeks, that is all. And what you discover on the other side of those 2 weeks might be the most important thing you have ever learned about yourself.